I'm pleased to be here today with the legendary baseball player, Cal Ripken. Thank you very much for joining us, Cal.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So it was said in baseball that the unbreakable record was Lou Gehrig's record of playing in 2,130 games consecutively. Nobody thought that could ever be broken. You broke it. You played in 2,632 games consecutively over 17 years. Why did you do that? I mean, did you ever think of maybe taking a day off would be a good thing, or?
So you're not going to ask me what my secret was, right?
Well, I'll get to that.
I don't know if I have one. I mean, I love the game a lot. Your everyday player was defined in those years as playing every game. And it was an honor to be thought of and counted on each and every day by your teammates. So I had my dad, who was also a coach, when I first came in, probably for the first 11 or 12 years of my career. And I think the real reason that I played is that I couldn't come into a ballpark and say you have turf toe, where you stubbed your toe and say, okay, I might need to miss a game or two. I couldn't face my dad, let alone the manager of the team.
Well, I've been, working for many years, and I have not done 17 years consecutively going in every day. You have a headache someday, you don't feel good. You never had a headache, no cold, nothing happened?
Yes. All of those things happen.
You played through it.
You learn to play through different things, and you find out really quickly that I can still compete. I still can play, even though I might be less than 100%. The hottest I ever got, I hit a double in, I think it was Seattle. Hit a line drive off the wall, came right to the left fielder. I'm running around first base trying to stretch it into a double. You see the throw coming in, it's going to be a little to the inside, so I slide to that side and grab the bag. And my elbow came this way. I mean, it hyperextended. And so I got up and it was hurting. I was thinking, damn, that's serious. So I finished playing in the field, didn't bother me in the field. But when I came up to bat the next time, I started to swing the bat, and it really hurt just to swing it easy in the on-deck circle. And I winced in pain, and the trainer came running out and says, what's wrong? And I go, I heard it 2 innings ago. Let me give it a try. So I went up to home plate, and I'm thinking, let me test it out. He throws a breaking ball in the dirt. I chase it in the dirt and wince again. It really hurt bad. The trainer comes running out and says, you sure you're all right? Manager left me in the game. And so then I concentrate a little bit harder. The next pitch comes in. I hit a line drive, one hopper at the second baseman. And I realized as I was running to first, when you swing and miss, it hurts like hell. When you make contact, it doesn't hurt at all. So I started focusing on shortening my swing, making sure I got a good pitch to hit, and I got hotter than I'd been. Home runs, doubles, all that kind of stuff.
I wish I'd known that when I was in Little League, because I missed a lot of the balls. But well, let me ask you, do you get tired of people saying to you, you did this record, 2,632 games, and they don't talk about the 19 times you're an All-Star, the most valuable player, World Series. You get tired of people just asking about the streak? And what about all the other things you did, or you don't mind people talking about the streak?
I don't mind at all. I mean, you were who you were. Now you look back and all you have is your memories of who you play. Some people would think that it was offensive, that you were a really good shortstop or you were a good offensive player. But I think people do kind of get obsessed with the streak, but it's all part of who you were.
So I played Little League All-Star shortstop, and when I was 8 and 9, and I didn't know whether I was going to get to the major leagues or not. When did you realize you were going to be better than someone like me? Did you realize that you were a little leaguer? When you were a little leaguer, did you really realize you were going to be really good enough to play in the major leagues?
Well, I was trying to think of all the 8-year-olds that were All-Stars that didn't play when they were 9. Let me see. I knew pretty quickly. I grew up in and around baseball. My dad was the manager of the minor leagues for the Orioles in the first 14 years of my life. So I went to work with my dad, or as early as 8 or 9. He put me in a uniform. I was the bat boy. I shagged in the outfield. I had a chance to ask all the players, how they caught the fly ball, how they swung the bat. So I had all these teachers in front of me, but I had the skill, that was pretty obvious early on.
Okay, so you played in high school. I assume you did very well in high school?
Yes.
Okay, so you get drafted by the Orioles, And at what point, when you're in the minor leagues, all the players played in the minor leagues for a while, did you realize you weren't just going to be an average player, you were really going to be a super player, or did you not realize that in the beginning?
No, I was 17. I was a second-round draft pick by the Orioles. I turned 18 at the end of the summer, and so it was my birthday is August 24th, so I was playing a couple of months before my 18th birthday. And when I first went away to play pro ball, you were a pretty big fish in a small pond in high school. You thought you were pretty good. And then you go, and all of a sudden you're part of a team, and you look around, and no longer you're not the big fish anymore. There was one shortstop by the name of Bob Bonner that came out of Texas A&M. He was like a 6th-round pick for us that year. And I was taking ground balls and doing stuff with him, and he clearly was light years ahead of me. He had a better arm. He could field the ball better. He was quicker on the transfer. And I kept looking at him going, I'm never going to play. You know, this guy's too good. I'm not that good. And they moved him immediately to Double-A, so which opened up the spot for me. And then I got my feet on the ground. I started playing pretty well and started to hit a couple home runs in my next year. And then I got to Double-A, and then I had a breakout season. And in 2 years, I caught Bob Bonner and passed him to the big leagues. So he stayed the same, and I got better.
What year did he get into the Hall of Fame?
I think he's a minister in Africa right now.
So, speaking of the Hall of Fame, you were elected with 98.5% of the vote. Have you ever figured out who that person was that didn't vote for you? I mean, who was this person waiting for?
I've hunted all 5 of them down. I think in my particular year, I think Mariano Rivera just went in at 100%, right?
The only one.
Of the vote. And in my particular year, there was a protest vote where 5 people didn't turn in a ballot in that particular year as a protest to the steroid era. But they said, well, and so they counted against you.
So in the steroid era, when you played, you obviously saw, I assume, some players you thought probably were juiced up or whatever the expression is. Did anybody ever come to you and say, look, you're really good, but you could be even better if you take some of these drugs? They didn't try that?
No. Looking back on it, you could probably see signs in hindsight that players that might have used. But when you're playing, if you're not in this secret society, you don't know. And I didn't know.
So some players, they were like 180 pounds, and then later they're 250 pounds. You didn't suspect maybe they were doing something unusual?
Yes.
So let's go back to your...
You didn't want me to expand on that, did you?
Oh, okay. Well, let's go back to your youth. You were a good high school player. You played in the minor leagues. Did you ever think about doing anything but play baseball?
I love basketball, and I wish I could have been Grant Hill.
He just told me he wanted to be Cal Ripken, but okay.
Well, maybe we can do it all over again. But I love basketball so much that I built a gym at my house, and I played basketball all winter long. And one of my greatest negotiating victories was they fired my dad as a manager in 1988, and I thought I was going to leave the Orioles and go to some other team. But by the end of the summer, they came to me and said, "Okay, we're in a rebuilding position. We'd like to build around you." And so they offered me a contract, and we negotiated the money. And then I said, "There's 2 things that I want." I said, one is that I want a no-trade clause, because all the way through that year, there was rumors about me being traded every single day to somebody else. And I kept thinking, hey, I could come to the ballpark and they could call me in the manager's office and say, "Okay, Cal, we just made a trade with the Boston Red Sox. You got to go, to there," and you had no choice. And so that made me feel uneasy. So I thought, if I'm going to commit to you, then you'll commit back to me. If we're going to go through this rebuilding process together, then I'll commit to you in the form of a long-term deal, but not so you can trade me to somebody else. So they said, "We've never had a no-trade clause in the history of the Orioles." I said, "Well, that's what it's going to take." And they said, "Okay, I got it." The second thing I wanted was saying, "I want you to put in the contract that if I get hurt playing basketball, that it doesn't affect my contract."
And they agreed to that?
And they looked at me for a minute, because they have in your contract, it's like you can't, no motorcycle racing, no skiing, and then they go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to their discretion of what you can do in the off season. And I told them, I said, "This is part of my off season training." And I said, and I haven't missed a game, so it works. So and then they came back and said yes.
Hey, so when your contract, I think your highest compensation level was $6 million a year. $6 million a year. That's a good compensation level in those days for sure, and today for the average person, that's a great income. But today, there are some players who are making $200, $300, $400 million over a period of years, one $700 million. Do you ever think maybe you should have waited a little bit longer to play in the major leagues? Or do you ever regret the fact that some people are making $700 million and they're not likely to be as good as you?
So every day I think that, yes. No, it is really interesting is that I had a really good job. I was a baseball player and you got paid for it. And the compensation, I was one of the early ones that broke $1 million a year. And then I got to $2 million a year. And then after towards the end, I was at 6, but then it started going crazy. I look at it and I remember all the old players that said, I wish that I would have played in that era. But I think the game evolves. The business of it used to be in baseball. I think at least I looked at myself as a sportsman. Maybe the value of the entertainment was in the collective where you're playing well as a team and you win, and that's cool. Then all of a sudden it seemed to step over to, I think a lot of players might think that they are entertainers now. Right. So it's a little bit more than what you do on the field. It's what maybe your commercials, things you do off the field. I think they see themselves differently. But the attention and the money is there for all that. Yeah.
Let's talk about baseball today. Baseball was called the national pastime for a long time, but obviously other sports have taken a lot of attention away from baseball, basketball and football, for example. Do you still feel that Americans have a certain passion for baseball that is similar to what they had 20, 30, 40 years ago, or do you think it's really changed a lot?
I think there's a deep love for baseball still in the country, and I see it at the Ripken Baseball was a kid's business that we developed, experiential when you play tournaments and we teach and those sorts of things. And you can witness it right in front of you, that the kids, 8 to 12-year-olds, feel the same way about baseball that we did. I think what's happened in sports overall is that there's specialization that happens earlier in the sports. And so you're not playing baseball, basketball, and football all that time. You're specializing really early on. So there's a lot less kids, I think, that are playing baseball, but the ones that are playing are actually playing more of it because they play spring, summer, and fall.
Speaking of that, lots of pitchers these days have elbow problems. They now get surgery called Tommy John surgery, and players have to take 1.5 years before they're really going to play again. Why are there so many pitchers who seem to have this problem now? They didn't have as many of those problems when you were playing. Is it because they're playing so young and they're throwing so many different kind of pitches that really hurt the elbow and the arm?
Well, I think some of that is true because Tommy John surgery has come down even to like high school and sometimes kids younger than that. And I think some parents feel like we'll just keep throwing, and if it breaks or whatever else, we can always fix it and you'll come back throwing harder than you did before. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But I think in the big leagues, with all the analytics that go around, I think pitchers are chasing velocity more, and so there's more training to get your arm stronger, to throw the ball harder. But they're chasing movement. So there's two things that happen. Is you throw a fastball, you get behind the baseball, but then when you try to make it move with the same power, you're torquing your elbow or your wrist right at the end to try to make it move. Right. And then all this pressure goes right here. And I think a lot of chasing speed and chasing movement, the combination of those two is causing it.
Let me ask you about this. When a baseball player is batting, a pitcher is throwing the ball at the home plate 60 feet, 6 inches away, and they can throw it from, let's say, 98 miles an hour, sometimes 100 miles an hour. And it could hit you in the head, and you've got very little time to react. Do you ever worry about when you're up there that somebody's going to try to hit you in the head? And did you get hit a lot? And why don't you just run out and hit the pitcher when you do that? Do you think it's accidental when they hit you, or do you think it's on purpose?
Most of the time it's accidental. Sometimes it's on purpose. The intimidation factor is a real factor. I'm not sure how much now. I've been out of the game 20 years, but they still have fights and people still get hit and all that kind of stuff. When I first came to the big leagues, it seemed like the pitchers were testing me. They'd throw a pitch up and in and knock you down, so you have to clean off your uniform and get up. And if it affected you where you were thinking about being hit and stepping in the bucket, they would win. They would get out. So what you had to do was prove that that's not going to work. So I'd get in and try to really have a better at bat, and then you hit a home run or you hit a double. All of a sudden they look at it and say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. But it is a real factor. Goose Gossage, I'll tell you really quick. You guys all familiar with Goose? Goose Hall of Fame guy, threw 100. In the time when their radar guns were slow, Goose threw harder than anybody in the league, 100 plus miles an hour. But he looked mean, and he hit Ron Say in the head in the World Series the year before I got a chance to face him. So when I got the chance to face him, I kept thinking Ron Say got hit in the head, and I didn't keep my heart in the at bat. I was stepping out, and it bothered me so much. I think I got to fix this, and I overheard our teammate making dinner plans with Goose Gossage after the game, and after I was driving home, I saw the place that they were going to go meet, and so I just pulled in, and they invited me to come in. I drank beers with Goose, closed the bar down with Goose after the game, found out that he was a nice guy. And so my next time up to bat, I didn't think about it getting hit anymore. I thought about hitting, and I was 4 for 5 off him the next 5.
So think about this.
That strategy worked.
When a golfer is lining up a putt on a tournament, everybody has to be quiet. Nobody's throwing anything at his head. Why does he need to have so much quiet? But you're not allowed to talk or say anything when you're putting for 5 inches. But if somebody's throwing a ball at your head 100 miles an hour, they can scream and yell. Doesn't it seem that's ass backwards?
Yes. Yes. It is interesting, though. When you play in front of a packed house, it's just noise. It's not, you don't hear the individual things. I mean, here in New York, I think the fans felt that they were part of the game. And so they were trying to get inside your head. They were screaming things out at you, try to play a little mind game with. And if you beat them and you did really well, they'd almost go, Cal, see you tomorrow. It was all part of it. The Boston fans were a little different, is that they were more personal. That if you beat them or whatever else, they'd hold it against you for your whole life.
I remember the old days when you were playing you played for your father for a while. Earl Weaver was your manager for a while. And in those days, when, let's say, a strike call went against, or ball call went against a player, the manager would rush out sometimes and yell. And now it seems as if the players meekly walk away from the call when it's a strike and they don't like it. They don't ever yell anymore. Why don't they yell at the umpire anymore? Why doesn't the manager come out and yell? And when they do go out and yell, why don't they have to stand right next to the person? They go right back to, they're standing 1 inch away. Why do they do that? They can hear from a foot away. Why do they have to get right close to the person and yell?
So let me ask you, did you like the arguments and stuff like that as part of the entertainment value of the game?
I can't say I liked it, but I sometimes thought when my side was getting screwed by something, I would like them to go out and fight for it. But yeah, I guess most fans didn't like it, right?
It had an entertainment value, but a lot of times the umpires started to become the focus of the game and all that kind of stuff. Now with they map out everything on the field, so they can tell if the umpire missed the pitch or not. And that's going to come in. And
what do you think about that? Now, if you can challenge a call now, and they go up to New York and they watch it on video and they make a decision there. You think that's good or bad?
I like it. Yeah. I mean, because one play could turn the whole outcome of the game, and they have the technology to do it now. And I think what you're going to see in the next couple of years is some form of the robotic strike zone. Whether they're testing it in the minor leagues on a challenge system, or like every third game, they just they have something in the ear of the umpire, and the robot or whatever calls the whole game based on when the ball's on the plate. He just tells the guy what to do. And so they're testing those things out. And I think the challenge system might be good, because a key pitch in the 8th inning with the bases loaded, and it's called a ball or a strike, the ball turns it in favor of the team that's got the bases loaded. The strike kind of gets them out of it.
Baseball used to be seen as a slow game. It might take 3 hours, 3.5 hours to finish a game. Major League Baseball changed the rules. So do you think that's good to have the games now maybe 2 hours, 20 minutes or something like that? Is that making it better for the fans, or are they saying, I want more baseball and I want the game to last longer?
Well, it's better, and I think what they did is they cut out the dead time. There was a lot of dead time that was happening. They did analysis. At the end of my career, the walk-up music started to become popular. So players, young players, I didn't care what song they played when I walked the home plate, just get up there and hit. But the young players kind of liked it. And they would tell them what to do. And sometimes they'd be in the on-deck circle and they hadn't played the song yet. And so they'd wait and look upstairs like this until they played the song, and then they'd make their entrance to the ballpark. The shot clock, or the pitch clock that they have now, allows the umpire to it gives them an enforceable tool to shape the behavior. There was always a rule that the pitcher had to throw it within 20 seconds of each pitch, but that got away from everybody, and now it's shaped the behavior, and I think the game moves the way the game used to move.
Well, when I was watching baseball as a young boy, a player would go up to hit, and he'd take the bat, and he'd put it in his hands, and he'd swing it. Now they have gloves, they have hats they have all kinds of things on their shins. They have all these equipment. Do you think how much better you could have been if you had all that equipment when you were playing? You ever thought about that?
I am jealous of the uniforms are awesome, although there's some controversy about this year's uniforms and materials. But generally speaking, the improvements in the uniforms, the bats, there used to be just one company that was allowed to have the bat contract, and now there's all kinds of choices and all kinds of varieties that you can choose from.
So when you were playing,
gotten better.
When you were playing, it was sometimes said that pitchers might put substances on the baseball, or what was called a spitter, and made the ball do things it wouldn't otherwise do. Did you ever see that, and you ever challenge it, or you didn't see that?
Gaylord Perry was the most famous of all spitballers. He actually wrote a book called Me and the Spitter, and as a kid, I read it. And then a few years later, I end up coming to the big leagues, and all of a sudden, I'm facing Gaylord Perry. So the first time I face him, ball comes in, it sinks a little bit, and then I hit a ground ball to shortstop. I make another out, and I'm thinking, if that's the spitter, that's nothing special. You know, it just seems like it's just a little bit better sinker. But then I came up with the bases loaded my third time up, and he threw me 3 pitches that dropped about this far, and struck me out, you know, whatever else, and then kind of walked off and shook his head at me like, that's the spitter.
Now, in our society, and in societies around the world, professional athletes are idealized. I mean, it's hard to believe this, but they're liked more than politicians, right? So athletes are really well liked and admired and so forth. But then when you finish your career, you have a whole different life. So you retired at what age? 41?
41, yeah.
41. You played 20 years, 22 years. 21 years in the major leagues, and you retired at an age that, you know, is old for a professional athlete, but young for somebody in private equity or something like that. So when you retired at that age, did you say, what am I going to do the rest of my life? And what did you decide to do for the remaining 10, 20 years of your life? What did you do?
So if you save your money pretty well, then you have choices, you know, and you could decide to learn how to play golf, and like a lot of people do, and kind of retire early.
Are you a golfer?
I play a little bit, but no. I could be pretty good.
I think you should try miniature golf. That's what I do.
So I looked at it as, you know, you kind of get bored. How can you do that? I looked at it as a second chance for a career opportunity. And so you looked. I wanted to learn business, and we bought minor league teams, and so it was a comfortable business model that you can kind of learn business that way, and that was kind of fun. At first, it felt like I spotted everybody else 20 years ahead of me. I'm 41, but I seem like I'm 21. You know, in the business world, you come out, and then you learn that a lot of the things you learned along the way in baseball can apply to your work ethic, how you go about doing things, your preparation, and all that kind of stuff. That all applies to what you're doing now.
So I have a grandson who's 4 years old. If he wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, what's the best advice you would give to a young person? He's a little young for advice maybe, but what is a 6 or 8 year old or 10-year-old who aspires to be a baseball player, what should they do?
Well, I think the worst thing you could do is put too much pressure on your kid. You know, like if you want it for him as opposed to him wanting it. You know, I think
Your father didn't put pressure on you. He was a professional coach. He didn't.
No, I mean, matter of fact, I could tell you that because my dad was in professional baseball, he only saw 2 of my games between the age of 8 and 18 before I got drafted. Parts of 2 because
But he didn't give you tips or anything, or tell you to do this or that?
No, I mean, he was a great instructor. I witnessed him instructing other people in the minor leagues, so I learned through his instruction, everybody else. But he never stood over me and said, "You got to play baseball."
Now, you're 6'4", and traditionally shortstops were more my height. And when you came along, people didn't want people like me to be shortstops anymore. So, did you change the game of baseball by saying shortstops should be big and better hitters, or is it going back to the old mode of being fast and good baseball stealers but not great hitters?
Well, I mean, a lot of the shortstops, Derek Jeter being one of them, gives me credit for my success at the position as a bigger shortstop that gave them opportunities that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have had. But I kind of think, Derek, you would have carved out your own path. But I did move from third to short. I signed, I was 6'2", 180 when I came out of high school. And then I had a late growth spurt. I almost grew 3 inches, and I put on, 5 to 8 pounds a year. And by the time I got to the big leagues, I was almost 6'5", 220. And they had put me at third base, but then Earl Weaver had this vision that I could play shortstop, and we'd be a better team if I went over to shortstop. So he one day just put me there, and my success at the position as a bigger guy, maybe is like when I'm a basketball fan. I wish I could have been a basketball player, but I remember Magic Johnson changing the thought of a point guard at 6'9". He's 6'9", all of a sudden the advantages he had of his size. I think people started to understand that a bigger guy could play shortstop and second base, and today they're some of the more celebrated positions.
So what is it like on the road when you're a professional baseball player? You play a game for 2.5 hours or so, but you've got to travel, and when do you get so tired, and the sleep, the jet lag and all that? How do you just rest and get recuperating when you're a professional baseball player, traveling all that much and having to play at least one game every other day or so?
Yeah, I mean, I remember 162 and 175 days in my first year. So if you just think about it, there's 13 days that are considered off days, and normally there were travel days coming back from the West Coast. But you're playing mostly night, you're traveling after the game, you're sleeping in, and all that kind of stuff. So making sure you get your sleep, making sure you eat at regular times was a routine. I keep thinking, if you want to stop someone from having a consecutive game streak, just play Monday at 6:30, play Tuesday at 7:30, then make a Wednesday 12 o'clock game. If you keep moving the times of the games around, your body wants to get into a routine, into a schedule. And it's hard nowadays with the different times and travel.
When you're a professional baseball player or a former professional baseball player, as famous as you are, people come up and all the time they want autographs, selfies, and they say, I hate to bother you, but can I bother you with a selfie or an autograph request? What do you say? You say, I'm too busy, or you just do it? Or how do you deal with all that? And when you go to a hotel and you're a Major League Baseball player, people have all these little kids who are trying to get autographs. How do you deal with all that?
When you get old, they don't do it so much anymore. No, I'm thankful that I still can't believe that I get recognized as readily as I do. And to me, you always keep in mind, and sometimes someone approaching you, they're all nervous and they lose their mind and they say, you're my biggest fan, and I go, I am? But they lose it. But then you have to keep in mind that it's meaningful to them. And so at that moment, by signing your name for a little kid and their eyeballs get all, and they run back to their mom or whatever else and say, look what I got. So you help that happen. So if you remember what happens afterwards, focus on, and you just manage it, you just get through it.
And what was it like the day that you broke the record of Lou Gehrig? There was enormous fan outpouring. Everybody's calling you, you're nationwide TV, and you're running around the stadium and so forth. Was that the highlight of your life professionally?
I would say there's two moments. I answer that question in two parts. The best feeling I ever had on the baseball field was catching the last out of the World Series 42 years ago. 42 years ago? 41 years ago, 1983, little humpback line drive. When you catch it, this part of the dream of being a baseball player is to win the World Series. And then now, because I caught the last out, then I won the World Series. So that's the best feeling. Second best feeling, and probably the best personal moment, was the lap around Camden Yards. I was embarrassed that the game was stopped because the game became official halfway through. And then everybody kept clapping. I kept saying, thank you, thank you. And then Bobby Bonilla and Rafael Palmeiro pushed me out of the line and said, you're going to have to take a lap around here before we'll never get the game started. And I thought it was a silly idea. So I went around, started shaking hands. The celebration went from almost 50,000 down to like one-on-one. And it was kind of cool that way. And by the time I got down to third base, I could care less if the game ever started again.
When you got to 2,632 games, you didn't get injured. You just volunteered to say, I don't want to do it anymore. Why did you decide to not keep going?
I was tired. No. I felt that there was some support that was being gone. We were going through another rebuilding process at that time. When you're not going well, there's fingers pointed all over the place. I just thought it was the right time to reset it. You know, and so I went into the manager's office 5 minutes before the game and said, he said, this is it, and I came.
So now that you're an owner of the Baltimore Orioles, how do you feel about these high-priced contracts that players are getting? You used to be a player who probably wanted higher-priced contracts. Now you're an owner. How do you look at that differently?
Slightly. I try to think of what are the other intangible values that you can offer a player besides the bottom line dollars, because the bottom line dollars are so big now, or whatever else, that you can make a case you're saying, well, how much? But I mean, it's about ego, and it's about breaking the bank, and it's about agents wanting to continue to make it go up for other people that come through. But if you take my situation was I wanted to play in one place. I wanted to have control of playing in one place. So I think if we get to a point where we're trying to convince one of our players to stay, you know, you want to try to tell them all the values that are associated with, you know, Derek Jeter playing his whole career in a pinstripe uniform, me playing my whole career in the Orioles, and what's that mean for you in the bigger picture? And hopefully they'll value some of that, but it's going to be a competitive landscape where we're going to have to pay some salaries.
And Baltimore is a smaller city compared to some of the New York teams or Los Angeles. Is that a big problem when you're in a smaller city in Major League Baseball?
I think overall, I never liked the idea because you were a small market team you couldn't compete. Because I think competition is in your knowledge. You know, you're drafting, you get to draft, you get to sign players, you get to develop players. You know, that's not all free agency that's happening. But if you're a big market team and you make a mistake in judgment on a player, you can throw more money at your mistakes. When you're a smaller market team, you have to be better at your baseball decisions.
Look, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being here, and thank you for what you've done for baseball and for Baltimore over many, many years. And if you had seen me when I was younger, do you think I could have learned how to be a professional baseball player? Is there any chance I could have been given my physique, or do you think it wouldn't have worked?
I think you made the right choice in your career.
All right. Thanks very much.